New game.
Well, by us, it feels like 30 degrees out there today.
And where do you live?
Very chilly.
Pardon me?
Pardon?
Barbara, where do you live?
Illinois.
Oh, Illinois. Okay. Yeah.
Well, you guys all saw the weather down there in Chattanooga and stuff.
Yeah,
A lot of damage down there.
for sure was. Yeah.
We're gonna have
And-
special music by Elijah.
But I did barely heard about it on the news or anything because there's all this COVID crap they keep putting on.
Yep. Well, I got some videos from Tanya, and it's in the area down there. It's pretty torn up,
Wow.
and not too far. I think that where David gets his dialysis, it was flooded, but they did take him, and they had power out, but they were back on. I can't,
Mhm.
make me dizzy. Elijah. To have the energy of a child.
Oh,
Yeah. Wouldn't it be nice if we had that as we got older?
And that happiness and excitement over everything.
Hi, Violet. I see you're on. I haven't seen you yet.
Who?
Violet, her photo's not on, but she signed on.
She's on there. I think can maybe see and hear us, but I don't know. She usually watches it through Roku.
As we do when the speaker's on.
Hello, Melody. We see your name, Violet, so we're glad you're here. And Randy's going to be on later. He had an appointment this morning, but he'll be back for his, hopefully back by then. And Christopher froze again. Must be cold.
yeah.
Good morning, Sandy. Are you having a meeting this morning?
Yes. Is that Violet?
Camera.
Tamara,
Oh,
what time are you having?
we're getting there. We've started already.
Oh, who's the speaker?
We're just saying hi and starting the morning, and I put 9:30, but if we're here, as you all know, we always do things first before the meeting even
Hi,
starts.
Melissa.
People start talking at 9:30 and then they're done by 10:15. Then we have 45 minutes to the next one. So
Okay.
just get here and talk and say
No,
hi.
besides me.
Hi, Melissa.
Snow today.
Oops. Let me check here.
Oh, no, I got too dark.
Not yet.
Okay, well, we can, somebody want to have prayer or something? I guess Keith can go ahead and start. Anybody? Am I supposed to
Yes.
say who?
I guess I will.
Okay, go ahead.
Heavenly Father, we want to thank you again for another day of life. We want to thank you for the privilege of being able to get together at this point, even if it's over the internet. All these blessings, Father, and the things that we have learned. I ask now that you'll send your spirit into our hearts, that we will have an understanding of what's being taught to us today, and fill us with your love and compassion for others and a Christ-like spirit. I ask all these things in the name of Yeshua.
Amen.
Amen.
you.
Was everybody ready?
Everybody's ready.
Ready.
Okay, let me bring up my screen snap here. First, I want to start out with, you're going to see some personal information of mine from the history that I have. And I don't want anybody to read into those things too much. There'll be some things that you see that I have personally done, which if I had to do it all over again, I would do it completely different. You'll see some documents that nobody here has seen before, except that I gave Chris some a number of years ago. And I want to have another prayer real quick. Dear Heavenly Father, please guide and help me today so that I can present these things in a way that people can understand them. In your name, amen. First of all, we have the 10 Commandments on the left. They are always there. They always will be. On the right, we have a constitution that's still in effect. We are told by Mrs. White, will go away eventually, or at least be ignored. And Sandy sent me this video that I want to briefly talk about before we start. It's called Israel Live, and I had seen this gentleman speak a few times before. And there he talked about something approaching this planet, my voice. And I talked about it in a PowerPoint Sabbath school called Planet Crossing. The other thing that he talked about was President Trump is not our president anymore. What this gentleman does not understand is that we have two governments. The one that you see is run by President Trump, and yes, he is in charge. And the second government, before we start, let me talk about a few things. Eisenhower talked about an industrial military complex. And when I was going to the International UFO Congress, I found out that that was done because he had set up this other underground military, and that after he set it up, these people excluded him and pushed him out. And he was extremely upset, and that's what that came from. Another place you'll see it is when, it's in the 1990s when Bill Clinton, he wanted to know what it was going on at Area 51. And so he had this guy that worked with him, Hubble. I think you maybe remember him. He told Mr. Hubble, go find out what's going on at Area 51. Well, a few weeks or a few months, Hubble came back and talked to Bill, and he says, well, guess what I found out? They said it's on a need-to-know basis, and you don't need to know. So the most powerful man in the United States could not know what was going on in this other part of the planet here. And then we will go in and talk about later in here some programs that was developed under the Ronald Reagan. And some of these programs people today have not even heard of. But first, let's go and we're going to read from the book of Revelation here. Let me put so I can see my own screen. And I beheld another beast coming up out of the earth, and he had two horns like a lamb, and he spake as a dragon. And we have always been told, and I believe this is correct, that this another beast is the United States of America. And yes, it is starting to speak like a dragon. And he exercised how many powers of the first beast? All the powers of the first beast before him, and causeth the earth and them to dwell therein, to worship the first beast, and the deadly wound, whose deadly wound was healed. And I am believing that some of these things that we see that we're losing our rights is exactly a fulfillment of that there when he exercises these powers. Verse 13, and he doth great wonders, so that he maketh fire come down from heaven on the earth in the sight of men, and deceiveth them that dwelleth on the earth. Now, who is that? That's United States. And deceiveth them that dwell on the earth by the means of those miracles which he had power to do in the sight of the beast, saying to them that dwell on the earth, that they should make an image to the beast, that's the Vatican, which hath the wound by the sword, and did live. And he had power to give life unto the image of the beast, that the image of the beast should both speak, and cause that as many as would not worship the beast of the beast should be killed. And he causeth all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and bond, to receive a mark in their right hand and their foreheads. So you see, I believe that this is a process. It doesn't happen overnight. But it's a process that the people who are not watching these things intensely, the people that are watching these things intensely will see that it's a process. Other people will wake up some morning and say, my goodness, what happened? Because they haven't been watching and praying like Jesus said. And you are not to be fearful, because we are to be a representative of Jesus Christ here on this earth. And that means not being resentful. That means honoring other people and being kind and everything else. Now, did you guys see this here on the news? Florida authorities arrested Rodney Howard Brown, pastor of the River at Tampa Bay Church, for holding Sunday services that officials said violated orders aimed at limiting the spread of the coronavirus. I remember him because I had a video that he was on a few years back. But when the sheriff arrested him, who was in the wrong here? Let's look. First Amendment of the Constitution. Congress shall make no laws respecting an establishment of religion, or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech or the press, or the right of the people peaceably to assemble and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. And people will say, well, but that's freedom of religion. It has nothing to do with it. But let's go and look inside of this and see what it says. Or the right of the people peaceably to assemble. And unless there is martial law, you cannot stop the people from peaceably assemble. That is part of our Constitution. Now, if you would, and I'm a news junkie. If you watched the Donald Trump last Monday, there was people that would ask him, says, why don't you just shut the whole country down? And he politely tried to tell them, can't do that because of the Constitution. That's right here. I can't not go and shut them down unless I'm going to do martial law. And this is why that he wanted the states to do these things, so he would not call martial law. The right of the people peaceably to assemble. Does it give a place there that says that they can stop it? Not in this part of the country, but there is a thing called martial law, which they can set the Constitution aside. The First Amendment guarantees our God-given, unalienable rights to worship and to peaceably assemble. Neither of these rights are contingent on our health status. This is a comment that somebody had made about the First Amendment and what's going on. Then I found this to be quite interesting. Just to be clear, none of this matters if there is a virus. I thought it was kind of interesting because there's people that want to shut our government, the Constitution down. And the Constitution says, no, you can't do that. Here's what Mrs. White says that the Constitution of the United States guarantees liberty of consciousness. That's to worship the way we want. Nothing is dearer or more fundamental. Pope Pius, in his encyclical letter of August 15, 1854, said, the absurd and errorous doctrines of ravings in defense of liberty of conscience are a most pestilential error, a pest of all others, most to be dreaded in a state. The same Pope, in his that letter of the December 8, 1864, anathematized, problems with that word, those who assert the liberty of consciousness and the religious worship also of such as maintenance of the church may not employ force, such as the maintenance that the church may not employ force. And you see, they're kind of making fun of our Constitution that says people can worship the way they want. Now, when it comes to, and Sandy, I'm what was right with your father when he talked about when they tell us to do something, we need to do what they recommend as long as it doesn't go between us and Jesus Christ. In other words, we do not need to make enemies with them. And I will show you later in this here how that 20 years ago, I, Keith Bond, became an enemy of them and got put on a list. And I'll go over documents today that show exactly how that happened. Let's see here. Here's another one by Mrs. White. The pacific tone of Rome in the United States does not imply a change of heart. She is tolerant where she is helpless. You see, she can't come over here and change our laws. She can't come over here and start martial law. Only we can do that. She is tolerant where she is helpless, says Bishop O'Connor. Religious liberty is merely endured until the opposite can be carried into effect without peril to the Catholic world. And that's from the Great Controversy, the 1888 one. And this stuff that's going on right now, I believe that the Catholic Church has a smile on their face. Of course, you won't be seeing them say that. Now we're going to go into some quotes by what our founders of this country told us. Any society that will give up a liberty to gain temporary security will deserve neither and will lose both. That was by Benjamin Franklin. China was able to control the outbreak because government was tracking people closely, said Shanghai workers Joy Huang. I don't want to get tracked, but meanwhile, I don't want infected people not getting tracked. Freedom has a price. Now you understand that? Freedom has a price. And that is not putting fear into people. That's falling in love with our freedom, which is guaranteed by Jesus Christ. And we'll talk about some more of those things later. Here's a choice. As a statute keeper, you'll have a choice. Do you want to be 100% safe? If you want to find yourself 100% safe, you will find yourself very soon with much less freedom. So you have a choice. Now let's go. Freedom is I can't read that. Freedom is bestowed upon us by other men. Let's see if I can. I can't read that top word. Freedom is not a gift bestowed upon us by other men, but a right that belongs to us by the laws of God and nature. By the laws of God and nature. So your freedom, does it come from the Constitution, or does it come from the by the laws of God? They come by the laws of God. And you won't see people today talking about freedom, except they'll say, well, you have permission to be free. No, it's not permission. It's a right that God gives us. Another quote, the duty of a true patriot is to protect his country from its government. That's why we have a Second Amendment. It's not for hunting or anything else. It's protect the government. But that's not what the young people are told today. That is a quote by Thomas Paine. Here's another one. Without liberty, law loses its nature and its name and becomes oppression. Without law, liberty also loses its nature and its name and becomes licentious. When you go back and look at the statutes and the judgments was put in place to protect the Ten Commandments. And the people that exclude some of those statutes, the appointed days, they may find themselves losing some of those precious things that our Heavenly Father gave to us. Remember, this is by Will Rogers. Remember, democracy never lasts long. It soon wastes, exhausts, and murders itself. There was never a democracy yet that did not commit suicide. In fact, the difference between, we have a republic here in this country, but so does Russia and so does China. The difference is that our republic is a limited republic. We didn't give them very much power. But today, they've gotten a lot more power. And that comes out right out from the text in Revelation 13. Now, there's people that they look at liberty and freedom and justice, and they say everybody ought to be equal. Well, let's see what some of our leaders used to say about that. Oh, shoot. Previous. A society that puts equality before freedom will get neither. A society that puts freedom before equality will get a high degree of both. So in other words, you know, when I work as a nurse in emergency room, I'm a male nurse, and I told nurses all the time that you need to stand up for what you believe with. Don't go on just because some nurse works in ICU or whatever. You need to go and learn to trust your own skills. And that's the same thing with physicians. It's your assessment is what's going to protect you in the long run. Here's another one that you probably will have heard of, by David Rockefeller. We are on the verge of a global transformation. All we need is the right major crisis, and the nations will accept the new world order. So we know that there's a new world order coming. And if you put it in your mind, and week after week, month after month, get your mind conditioned for it's coming, then when it comes, you won't be fearful. You won't be afraid. It's just like Tuesday's going to be tomorrow. You won't have to fear for those things because you know it's coming. This is why we are supposed to study prophecy, so that when these things come, Get the fear out of your life. Calmly go and present what you believe in. Now we're going to go into some programs that was developed before that people have not known about. Oh, you hear once in a while people in the news will hint about something. But this is called Operation Mockingbird. It's an alleged large-scale program. You see, they don't want to say, yeah, this is what it is. This here, by the way, comes from Wikipedia. Program of the United States Central Intelligence Agency that began in the early 1950s and attempted to manipulate news media for propaganda purposes. It funded student and cultural organizations and magazines as front organizations. And if you've looked at the CIA, they present front organizations doing regular business, but it's actually founded by the front, by the CIA. Its usual MO was to place reports developed from CIA provided intelligence with cooperating or unwitting reporters. These reports would be repeated or cited by the recipient reporters and would then in turn be cited throughout the media wire services. These networks were run by people with well-known liberal but pro-American big business and anti-Soviet views. And then it goes on to say, yeah, but the church, there was a senator or Congressman Church, he went and they changed all this. Oh, really? How come you can go and watch the same different news agencies saying the exactly same words? It doesn't, they just wanted you to believe that it's changed. Now, Jeremy Corsi. Now we're going to go back to the two government things again. And why I put this as a separate thing is because I met this guy. I met him back in the mid-1990s. He spoke over at the Conspiracy Conference after a book that he wrote. This book was called Atomic Iran. And afterwards, I went up and talked to him about the ram and the ego to Daniel 8. And then it says in the Daniel 8 that it's supposed for that very end of time. And I told him, I says, 1844, he doesn't know anything about 1844, was not the time of the end. But this here is at the time of the end, and it deals with Iran. That's Persia that it mentions in there. Now, why do I bring this up? He was with the Mueller report. He was the one of them that was, they tried to indict. They tried to get him to say the wrong things. Well, the reason is because the deep state does not like this man. What he came out and said was in 2012, 4 generals came and talked to him. And they said, we're going to have a coup d'etat here in the United States because we have to get Obama out of office because of what he's doing. Now, I wonder why they came and talked to Mr. Corsi. I don't know. But then he says about 2 or 3 weeks later, these 4 same generals came to him and said, don't worry about anything. We're not having a coup. We talked to Donald Trump, and Donald Trump's going to take care of the problems. So I am in the belief that this other government, the military, and Donald Trump made an agreement. Who knows what that agreement is? And who knows if Donald Trump gets off track from what their agreement was? No idea. I just reported what he had come out and said. I found that there quite revealing. Now we're going to go into some other programs that was made up in the 1980s when Ronald Reagan was governor. Now, I am a very conservative person. I really liked Ronald Reagan. But a lot of people, you know, once they go and look at the events afterwards, realize that the people in the United States, they lost a bunch of freedoms in the 1980s. And it wasn't because of Ronald Reagan. It was because of his vice president, George Bush Sr., who is, in my humble opinion, after some books I read, was one of the most influential people on the planet. Because Ronald Reagan was told, if you want to be president, Bush will be your vice president. So let's look at this. The federal government has been developing a highly classified plan that will override the Constitution in the event of a major terrorist attack. It is also compelling a secret list of citizens who could face detention under martial law. Have you heard about this here list? Well, we're going to talk a little bit about this little list. This here is talking about the continuity of operations, or continuity of government, or COG. Now, they have a template and instructions for federal department and agencies, July 2011. And I'm going to show you one of the templates. And I believe that these get changed all the time. Continuity plan, template, and instructions. The purpose of this template is to provide instructions, guidance, and sample text for the development of continuity plans and programs in accordance with the federal continuity. That means if something happens in the United States, the government, and it'll be the secondary government, will take over and continue on. Directives 1 and 2 for the federal executive branch continuity, I have problems with that word again, planning. Facilitates performance of executive branch essentials functions during all hazards. Did we see any hazards recently? Emergencies or other situations that may disrupt normal operations. And one of those is right here. An emergency condition may require the relocation of, and they put your name in there, emergency relocation group. And it goes on and talks about that. We know today that this here is what FEMA does. It is one of FEMA's operations. Continuity of government resides in a legal realm compromising national emergency plans that would trigger the takeover of a country by extra constitutional forces and effectively suspend the republic. In short, it's a roadmap for martial law. And this was all developed under Ronald Reagan. No, this hasn't been developed in the last 5 or 10 years. It's just sitting there like with the Sunday blue laws and these other things. Very soon, we are going to, don't be afraid, we are going to stand up and tell people, and then they will listen, that the Sabbath, the 7th day of the week, is God's law, and the statutes are also his, and we need to observe them. Now I wondered in my life, instead of calling myself a Seventh-day Adventist, if I should say that I'm a statute keeper, because the Sabbath, Seventh-day Sabbath, is a statute. Plans drawn up during the Reagan administration suggested this parallel government would be ruling under authority given by law to the federal emergency, it's FEMA. And you see, this is what I was talking about with Sandy. You remember that there's two governments? This is a parallel government. There's people that know about it, but you won't see the media ever talk about it because they want people to be scared to death. There's no need to be scared. Under law, during a national emergency, FEMA and its parent organization, the Department of Homeland Security. Now, what did Homeland Security come out of? It came out of a crisis, 9/11. Homeland Security would be empowered to seize private and public property, all forms of transportation and all food supplies. The agency could dispatch military commanders, which is the other government, to run state and local governments, and it could order the arrest of citizens without a warrant and hold them without trial for as long as the acting government deems necessary. Arrest people without a warrant. You know, before, when people would come to your house and see stuff, they had to have a warrant to look. Well, I don't know if you know anybody that's had the IRS or their people come in. Here's the way they do it now, because Chuck, a friend of mine, had this happen done. They have this warrant that's got a signature by the judge on the bottom of it, and they just write down what they take. That was the result of the Patriot Act. It is appropriate for any government to plan for the worst, but when the continuity of government plans are shrouded in extreme secrecy, unregulated by Congress or the courts, it becomes an overreacting surveillance state. And see, this is some of the stuff that Trump last Monday says he does not want to do. You have to listen to some of those. Shut down everything. Shut down everything. In other words, call martial law. No, he doesn't want to do that. And Trump is somebody we need to pray for. A former NSA officer tells us that the Treasury Department Financial Crimes Enforcement Network, using an electronic funds transfer, that's an EFT, people don't know what that is called, surveillance program, also contribute data to Main Core. Now, have you ever heard of a program called Main Core? Most people have never even heard of it. Well, I know that I'm also on a list of that that surveillance program. I know that very well, and you'll see documents pretty soon here that will show why they have me on that. And then it goes on to say, if you have ever refused to file taxes, you are listed on the database. It's one of the reasons for being on this list. That is for failing to file taxes. And you see, my issue with the IRS was never not paying taxes. It was always filing under penalty of perjury, that unequally yoked, that you agree with everything that they have done for you. And we'll get into more of that in a little bit. Let's see here. In 2004, James Comey, you've heard of him recently? Yeah. James Comey expressed concern over how this secret database, which is Main Core, the secret database was being used to accumulate otherwise private data on non-targeted U.S. citizens for use at a future time. He discovered that President Bush had authorized the NSA to use this classified continuation of government database on Americans. And that's kind of interesting because he went on to do the same thing. If you've read what he was doing under Trump. Now, who was in charge of this program in the 1970s? Well, we'll see right here. It was reported that the Iran-Contra Colonel Oliver North had spearheaded the secret contingency plan, codenamed Rex 84, which called for the suspension of the Constitution, turning control of the United States over to FEMA, and the appointment of military commandos to run state and local governments. Remember about 20 or 30 years ago, people was talking about Rex 84? You remember that? And people, oh, they're going to do this. They was having fear. No, they're not going to do that until the time comes. Rex, steady speaking. Now, in this here, it was suggested that if something had happened to our government and this other plan took over, that it would have been Colonel Oliver North that would have been leading it. But it didn't occur, so we never know. Now let's look and see what happened in Congress about this here. And I know I have seen this many times in the last 15 years, people have said it. And at one point during the Iran-Contra hearings, Representative Jack Brooks of Texas focused on this and asked Oliver North about this database. This database that they're talking about is Main Core, which at that time was believed to be controlled by the Federal Emergency Management or FEMA. And immediately, Senator Dan Inouye, who was the chairman of the Iran-Contra hearings, cut him off, said, that deals with a very sensitive classified information. We can't talk about it. And it was never really discussed after that. But there has been numerous articles that's been talking about what exactly was that very sensitive classified information. Well, excuse me, that was about putting the Constitution aside and having another, basically us losing all of our rights. But they didn't want people to know about it back then. But you can find out. If you want to do some research on it, just put in Main Core, and there's a bunch of stuff that's written about it. Now, going to present time, there is a program, and I heard them talking about this program this morning. This comes from Taiwan. My phone, which is satellite tracked by the Taiwan government to enforce quarantine, ran out of battery at 7:30. By 8:15, 4 different units called me. By 8:20, police were knocking at my door. Here's what I heard him talking about this morning. That if you come down with the virus, all you have to do is give them your phone number. They will check on your phone and get all of your people that's on there and will notify each one of them that you're positive. That's called surveillance, and they're not supposed to be doing in the United States. Although they're talking about it, just talking about it. The more data you have on a particular target, the better that the software, Main Core, can predict what the target will do, where the target will go, who it will turn to help. Main Core is a table of contents for all the illegal information the U.S. government has compiled on specific targets. Besides the IRS documents that I'm going to soon show you, I hope that they read in there on my computer about the Seventh-day Sabbath and the feast. I have nothing to hide. Maybe they will be converted to my Savior, Jesus Christ. I hope so. Because you see, that's what I stand for. But we will go through some of these things here. Let's see here. Europe has its own sensibilities with more importance placed on data protection. In Germany, a draft coronavirus law was provision enabling tracking by smartphones of affected people without any time limits. See, this morning they was talking about that there was going to be a 15-minute time limit. There should be no time limits. And was amended after the Justice Minister expressed her opposition. See, there's people that still out there saying, no, our people's going to have freedom. And you see, those people is the ones you need to be praying for. The problem is that the government has issues with limits and will push boundaries until enough pitchforks come out. Then everyone forgets while Big Brother has a new suite of toys to track and control and oppress it well. See, and after 2001, they came out with a Patriot Act. This will be temporary, and we need to have it so there will be no more terrorist attacks in the United States. Well, Did that go away? No, it's still with us. Now, people know that I go to this, sure, it didn't show up there, the Economic World Forum, and I get a big email with all their updates every Friday, and this here was last Friday. And you can see over here, you see clear to the right here, it says United States, anti-globalism. You can thank Donald Trump today for that. These people do not like Donald Trump. If Hillary Clinton was in, you would not see anti-globalism there. You would see globalism. Of course, that's just my personal opinion. Now we're going to getting ready to go into some these other documents. Let me go who these people are. 1999, I briefly talked about some of these people before in some of my Sabbath schools. Yeah, I still have that shirt. In 1999, I went to an anti-one world government over by Rachel, Nevada, over by Area 51. And this guy on the left, his name is Anthony Hilder. He makes documentaries. The following year, him and I sent out in an RV and talked about globalism for 6 hours, at least 6 hours. It was all day. Well, one of the international UFO meetings I was at, he introduced me to this woman. Now, you know who she is? Her name is called Arizona Wilder. Now, you know, I don't remember the woman that wrote the book called Transformation. I don't remember her name, but she was one of those MK Ultra monarchs for the rich people on the planet. Anyway, I got to meet her. And then Jordan Maxwell was there, and Jordan Maxwell asked me, Keith, who are you? And I says, I'm a registered nurse, emergency room, that time. And he says, no, I didn't ask you what you did for a living. I asked you, who are you? And that's when he says, you need to go home and you need to study the IRS codes. I went there, and then studying the IRS codes, it led me right to the Vatican. And that's why I found out that Christmas and Easter was a pagan holiday. I came home and said, told my son, no more Easter, no more Christmas in our household. I do not command other people in our household. If they want to worship them, they can. You can see my wife and my son was out doing the Easter egg hunt last week. I don't, say, no, you can't do that. People have to make their decisions on their own. And then about 5 years after that, I met Dave Chavez at one of our meetings, and he introduced me to the feast, and my life changed forever. Thank you, Dave, if you're watching. Now we're going to go to my filings, the things that I did. Now, you've heard up here at the top left here, it says IRS FOIA request. I learned how to, and this here was for an individual master file. I learned how to do some FOIAs. Now, I hadn't done it until this last year. I hadn't done any for a while. There's a woman that lives in, I think, Visalia. I done one for her recently. And it was for the Porterville Court, Supreme Court. And they responded. I have another one right now that is, it's for the Pentagon, Department of Defense. They responded back and understand now that they're all on hold because of the coronavirus. But they're all based on this here. Now let's go to the next one. These are all on, when I filed those years, you'll see all of these here. Now you see, this is why when I go and talk about the Old Testament, when I go back into what the statutes actually say, when you find those things, they mean something. The law means something. And when the United States government has something, they don't want you to find out about it. Now you'll see right here, it says Virgin Island TC 150. And I showed some of these things to Chris. I don't know if he remembers it. Let's go to the next slide. Here is it blowed up. Virgin Island TC 150. And we'll go into what a TC 150 is very shortly. Here it is right over here. You see it says TC transaction code. There it is again, TC transaction code. And I put these wide afterwards so you can actually see them, because otherwise it's kind of small. And you see up the top here, it says that's IMF. That's not the Internet Monetary Fund. That's an individual master file. Whenever they go and after you file the first time, they put you on a master file, and you'll see my master file here shortly. This here is on their instructions of how to deal with people. Adjustment to Virgin Island Form 1040. Did you know that your 1040 that you do every April 15th is actually referred to in their documents as the Virgin Island 1040 form? There it is right there. Now you know why I don't trust our government for anything. Here's another one, adjustment to, and this is the same one. See, this here blowed up. So it's larger so you can see it. Route claims received from taxpayers residing in the Virgin Islands to PSC for processing. I did not know that I lived in the Virgin Islands. I thought I lived in California. Check TC 150 DLN for blocking Series 98 Virgin Islands. And that there is on my my form. This is what they have. Now this is the actual right here, IMF, individual master form right there. MSC transcript specific. They have specific, they have different ones. Now, I had these decoded by 2 different federal attorneys. And we're going to see this transaction code right here. This is what we're going to look at when we come to the next slide, right here. SFR, substitute for return. In other words, if you don't file, they'll refile for you. It's just that they don't have your signature on it. Here's the, right here, 150, transaction code. And this is the effective date that it was redone. Continuing. Ignore this up here. This is a person that actually did this FOIA response letter. And these are all on my file that I sent to the numerous agencies. The transaction code 150, let's see, I think I blew it up too. The transaction code 150 indicates a tax liability assessed when a tax return is filed and a return is posted to the master file. The Virgin Islands 150 relates to the tax liability assessed to a U.S. self-employed tax return Virgin Islands, Guam, American Samoa, and indicates amount of self-employment tax assessed for this type of return. And this here is part of the 18th pages response that I sent to them, saying bunch of garbage. See right here from the transaction code 150, it indicates a tax liability assessed when a tax return is filed and return is posted to the master file. And then it goes on here, Virgin Islands 150 relates to the tax liability assessed on a U.S. self-employed tax return Virgin, and it goes, you know, basically it's the same thing. And that there is what I just read to you. Okay, so why do I put these things up here? It's because everybody in the United States, when I was a little child, my parents told me, you know, in a lot of the big cities, the Catholic Church has a list of all the Seventh-day Adventists in that town. And that's a list. In actuality, we should be proud to be on it. Now, the other night, my son, Brex, he's 6 years old. I was sitting out in front listening to the birds and stuff, and he comes out and he sits down on a little table there and he says, "Hey, Daddy, when are you going to go and spread blood on our door to protect us?" See, little ones don't know these things. This is from an Israeli newspaper. Passover Eve, Israel to fall under full curfew for the first time since the 10 plagues. On Passover night, all Jews in Egypt were on lockdown because of the plague of the firstborn. In fact, the very term Passover meant that the plagues passed over the Jewish household. This year, too, the nation of Israel will be in total lockdown. So don't be afraid. What I'm saying is, keep the feast and pray every day that your household will be protected, and it will be protected. Our protection comes from Christ. It does not come from the government. Now, Microsoft founder Bill Gates announced on March 18, 2020, during a Reddit Ask Me Anything session, that he is working on a new invisible quantum dot tattoo implant that will track who has been tested for this virus and who has been vaccinated against it, reported Jim, this guy, on a Saved magazine article that was sourced from biohackedinformation.com. The digital certificates Gates was referring to are human implantable quantum dot tattoos that researchers at MIT and Rice University are working on as a way to hold vaccination records. Now, these here, it said in this here that these was at least 18 months in the future. They're not ready yet. And it goes on, the quantum dot tattoos will likely be supplemented with Bill Gates' other undertaking called ID 2020. Now, I thought that people was being told that this was the United Nations program. No, it's called the United Nations program to get it over the people. According to this article, it is a program from Bill Gates. And I believe it's from the Vatican myself, but this project is supported by the United Nations and has been incorporated into the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals Initiative, which is part of the Agenda 2030. This is as good as microchipping and vaccinations, even better. People will lose their access to money if they don't have it. That's all it was in that article. And you know, I did not send that article out. Somebody sent it to me. I read too much. And this is another thing that I found. This is from North Carolina. Certificate of Post-Disaster Reentry. And this basically means that this person has been following, that came as positive and is now negative. And I believe this picture was from 1918, 1919, with them wearing a mask. Wear a mask or go to jail. See, they put fear into you back then also. It's all about control. And if you notice these here people, what's this woman doing here? This mask hanging over her nose, but she's breathing through her nose. So she might as well take it off. And then I found this interesting. This was a book by Dean Koontz, The Eyes of Darkness. And he wrote about, and this, you know, this is, as far as I know, it's fiction. I haven't read the book. Then you see, they call this stuff Wuhan 400 because it was developed at their rDNA labs outside the city of Wuhan. And it was the 400th viable strain of man-made microorganisms created at that research center. Now, when we have on top, you see the COVID-19, you know why it's called 19? It's not the year 2019. There was a 19th virus outbreak from there. Is anybody still there?
Yes,
Yes.
we're here.
Now, I don't want anybody to take those things wrong, because we are here as a representative of Jesus Christ. And we need to present the feast and his seventh-day Sabbath to the planet. And that's what we are to be witnesses. And as you can see, I trust the government zero. And I believe Donald Trump has hired some people that he should not hire. And he needs our prayers every day.
Well, he may have done it on purpose too.
He
Keep
could
your
have.
enemies close. We'll see.
But you seen what Barr said yesterday? Anybody that has prevented people from going to church, they're going to have to deal with him.
Well, I have a question for you.
Yeah.
My understanding, I read on the news several days ago that we are under a national emergency.
Yes.
Isn't that martial law?
No. It's different.
It's not the same thing.
Very
How so?
close. Very close, but it's different. Last
Okay,
Monday.
because-
Go ahead.
No, that's all right. Go ahead.
Last Monday, if you watched, and I watched these news, I haven't since the Feast of Unleavened Bread started. But last Monday, when Trump gave his news conference, there was a woman, and I don't know what news place she was. She asked him 2 or 3 times why he did not shut the whole government down. And he told her 2 or 3 times, the Constitution does not allow me to do that. And then he says, and I don't want to do it. It means he can call martial law. Calling a national emergency, that provides money for different agencies. Remember about 15 years ago, there was a Congress passed this thing. It was called the Weather Modification Act. Where are you, Joe? Oh, there you are.
I'm right up here.
Yeah, I see you now.
Okay.
15. You remember about 15 years ago, Congress passed the Weather Modification Act?
Vaguely.
The reason why they passed that act was they provided a new agency and they have to provide money for it. That all dealt with money.
Right.
They would have assumed that hopefully that nobody knew about it, but yeah, people knew about it.
Well, when you spoke quite a little bit on the IRS. The IRS and your income, everyone is required to file that has income. That's the law in the IRS. That puts you in a different category than if you work for wages. Wages are in the common law realm where the income is in a different realm. So it's the same thing basically, but one is a corporation and corporate status working with, and the other is like supposed to be a free man.
Yeah.
In common law.
My issue was not paying taxes.
Right.
My issue was filing this Virgin Island 1040 form.
Well, that's the whole point. When you file the 1040 form, you are testifying under penalty of perjury. They don't come to your door. You go and get this form and you petition them and you promise on this 1040 form, you are promising them that you owe the money. You can be held in 6 months in jail in contempt if you go renege on that. You are promising, look, take this money. I promise you that I owe this money to you. And that's what the 1044 does, because you're claiming income. But if you work for wages, you're not in that system, at least verbally.
Yeah.
Wages are different than income.
Well, anyway, that thing lasted for about 10 years.
Well, where a lot of this came from, Keith, is where maritime law was moved on to the land,
Right.
and maritime law took over the whole structure, and this is why these things are so secretive. But what is running on the land now is maritime law, and most of
No.
this, I must say,
No,
most of
I've
it.
got to interrupt on that.
Go
That's
ahead.
not true. That's not true. That's kind of a counterfeit. It's not that we're under maritime law. What happened was, it goes back to 1860s with Lincoln, and what happened, the outward showing was the Civil War. But what it was all about was bringing in the, what do you call it? Commerce. And and I can kind of prove this with Lincoln wrote the first executive order that would not be permissible if the Constitution were still valid. What happened in the 1860s was Lincoln wanted commerce, the North wanted commerce, and the South said commerce is against Scripture. We will secede from the Union if you do this. Then Lincoln basically said, "Not on my ship, you won't." And under parliamentary law, if Congress walks out without a date to reconvene, they can never lawfully reconvene as Congress ever again. Lincoln went forward with the plan. Congress walked out without a date to reconvene, or sine die, without day. That dissolved Congress, which changed our government. It basically nullified parts of the Constitution. Congress, back at gunpoint, made them the trustee of the now bankrupt United States of America, because it bankrupted us to do the war. And we went to England to get the money to pay for the war, which put us really back under England again. Basically the Rothschilds and the Rockefellers. Then when let's see what happened next. So many things happened at once. It's kind of hard to explain them all.
Yeah, that's why I didn't want to get into any of that stuff. I just wanted to show that we are on a list.
Yeah. So basically what happened was that merged. That's why Congress, if you read the law books, it says these are not laws and never can be. They can only be titles, codes, rules, regulations, but they can't be law because they're changeable. Laws are things like the law of gravity. They're not changeable. So then in the 70s, Nixon merged the judiciary with the executive. So there's really only one branch of the government, the executive. So that's kind of the whole thing there in a nutshell. So I'll leave now.
Okay, we all have a lot of ideas, but let's kind of get back to why we're having our meetings and camp meeting.
Yeah.
Because everybody has a lot, and sometimes you can make people wonder if they're doing something wrong and all that stuff. So
Could I ask Keith one more question? What color of list are you on? Are you red, blue, or what? Yellow?
I don't know. I just know that I'm listed on that main core.
Okay, because it's color coded. Okay.
See, what I didn't say is in about 2010, they took 95% of my wages. And I was at the end. I didn't care what happened. I says, God, take me unless you have something else for me. Apparently he had something else for me. So I contacted this attorney down in LA, and he called me a week later and he says, who are you? And I says, Keith Bond. He says, no, who are you? I says, Keith Bond. He says, well, the IRS don't like you. In fact, they hate you and they wish you was dead. And it's all because of those documents that I had found out. And so I made an agreement for them at that time that I would file for the rest of my, until time of the end. And then I told him, here's what I'll do. After I file, I'll go and pray for forgiveness from my Heavenly Father. He says, well, that works for me. So I made an agreement with them to file every year.
If you don't make $25,000 a year, if you're retired, you have income, I understand. But if you don't make $25,000 a year, my understanding, you're not required by their own codes to even file.
Right. I know. My son's never filed.
Right.
Anyway, go ahead, Sandy.
Okay, Randy was next, but he's out right now, so we're gonna come back at 2, an hour early. Hopefully everybody hears this that's listening, and Randy will be on, so it'll be at 2 instead of 3. So we'll have a 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, and 4, which will be Randy, and then Clinton, and then Charmaine's. So come back at 2 and we will be here. And thank you, Keith. I appreciate that. A lot of information there.
And I'll never talk about it again.
Heavy
I
material.
want that all done, but I
I
wanted
think we-
people to know who I am.
Right. And I think a lot of people need to know that and pray and know that God is in control.
That's right.
And Trump's trying hard, so let's just,
And like I said, he needs our prayers every day.
Yes.
so.
Thank you,
All right, well,
Keith.
thank everybody for being here, and we will be back on at 2.
Thank you.
Mhm.